The key thing about the first glance impression here is that HTC basically repeated its design from last year, while Samsung really didn't. The HTC One M9 features an aluminum chassis dotted with front-firing speakers flanking a full HD display with a new double anodization process and precision fit and finish making it stand out from other metal smartphones. The Samsung Galaxy S6 incorporates metal too, but here it's accented and augmented by Gorilla Glass 4, a newer, stronger material than HTC's Gorilla Glass 3. While it's much more fingerprint-prone, the S6 is also the more rounded of the two, the one less likely to rough up your skin with a sharp edge, and it's much thinner and a bit lighter as well. They're both beautiful, just in very different ways. Below the skin, in the world of processing and pixels, Samsung gets a chance to pull ahead a little. The processors are each 64-bit, but Samsung's does better in some benchmarks. The screens are both excellent, but Samsung's Quad HD Super AMOLED is by far the more pixel-packed and vibrant. The One M9's battery is 11% larger, but the Galaxy S6 has integrated wireless charging. HTC beats Samsung in camera resolution, but the Galaxy brings optical stabilization and a better lens. Tie in the usual Samsung extras like the improved fingerprint scanner and heart rate sensor, and the Galaxy S6 emerges as the more densely packed device. More features doesn't always mean a better experience, something Samsung's proved time and time again with its bloated and bogged-down software. This year, the company swears up and down it's banished interface lag to a distant memory, and our experience on the demo units bears that out for now. Also, animations have been accelerated, typeface and color selections have been updated to reflect the new Samsung aesthetic, and shortcuts like double-tapping the home button to launch the camera show just how fast this software can be. But HTC's Sense Skin hasn't been sitting still. Version 7 maintains the already blazing speed of previous versions. Despite the intricacy and deep-reaching hooks of Sense, it still feels like a very light UI. Features like Blink Feed still offer more customization and a more personalized experience compared to their Samsung equivalents, and nice touches like the lock screen mealtime suggestions and occasional contextual bits of information might make the One M9 feel more homey to some people, more like a fun sidekick than a bland instrument just awaiting input. Maybe we're just giving HTC more points here because of how much better Sense looks. Samsung's software may no longer officially be called TouchWiz, but those cartoony icons and settings toggles continue to evoke bad memories of yesteryear. Fortunately, whichever look you like better, each phone offers prominent theming options to change and customize the experience. Finally, we'd be remiss not to mention the biggest difference here, which is something I'll call the quantum leap effect. After years of stubbornly sticking to a stale formula, Samsung finally dared to give us something different, something worlds better than its predecessor. HTC didn't have as far to go with the M9. Last year's M8 was one of our favorite smartphones of 2014, but it itself was a redo of the earlier M7. The result is that HTC seems to be spinning its wheels a bit, its long-standing sheen dulling slightly under the withering glare of its reinvented, super-reflective rival. How the shine on each one will stand up to a full battery of tests remains to be seen. There are always umpteen differences between HTC and Samsung flagships, from color selection to browsing to sound tests to camera shootouts. We're going to cover them all when we do our full review and comparison coverage in the weeks ahead. And yes, we'll even have both phones in the same room for those videos. If you have an opinion, a preference, or some incontrovertible fact that puts one over the other in your mind, share it with us in the comments below.
Available in April 10 globally with a few colors to choose from as well. However, the blue topaz will only be available for the S6 and the green emerald will only be available exclusively for the S6 Edge. The price hasn't been announced yet for either phone, but I believe it will land anywhere from $600 to $800, with the S6 Edge costing slightly more. It'll also be available in these retail stores and carriers. Alright, now let's talk about specs. Both phones are very similar in height and width, however the M9 weighs more due to its full aluminum body. Not only is the S6 lighter, but it's also much thinner than the M9, measuring at 6.8mm for its thickness. The HTC One M9 sports a 1080p Super LCD 3 5-inch screen with a pixel per inch count of 441, whereas the S6 and Edge sport a 1440 by 2560 5.1-inch Super AMOLED screen with a pixel per inch count of 577. Software-wise, the M9 is running HTC Sense UI 7.0, while the Galaxy S6 sticks to their TouchWiz, and to be fair, Samsung actually announced that their UI is 40% lighter than before, so I'll definitely be testing that out when I get my hands on one. Both phones start at 32GB of internal memory, however you can expand up to an additional 128GB via SD card slot on the M9. Unfortunately, the S6 and S6 Edge, there is no option to expand your memory, so you have to decide on how much memory you need before buying one, just like the iPhone lineup. When it comes to battery life, only one phone gets an upgrade while the other gets a downgrade. The M9 jumps up to a 2840 mAh battery, up from 2600 from the M8, and the Galaxy S6 downgrades to a 2550 mAh battery from 2800 last year. I'm actually really curious about the battery performance and whether or not this change is actually an upgrade for the device or a downgrade, but I guess we'll find out once I get my hands on one. Moving to camera specs, the M9 finally gets rid of that horrendous dual camera feature on the back and instead replaces it with a 20.7 megapixel sensor with an aperture of 2.2. The Galaxy S6 on the other hand sticks to the same 16 megapixel camera but with a much lower aperture of 1.9, giving it much better low light performance. Samsung also stated that their camera is a lot better this time around, so I'm really excited to test it out. The front-facing cameras on both phones can shoot in 1080p at 30 fps, however the M9 has a 4 megapixel sensor and the S6 has a 5 megapixel sensor. Both phones can also shoot in 4K resolution and slow motion at 120 fps. And here is a list of the rest of the specs, which I won't bore you guys with. You can pause the video if you want time to read them all, but for the sake of time, I will move forward. Now let's talk about build quality. The M9 has a full aluminum body with rounded edges and a rounded back just like the M8 was. However, it's not as slippery thanks to its coating and thicker sides, making it much bulkier and easier to hold on to. The S6 on the other hand has definitely stepped up its game with a full metal frame and Gorilla Glass for the front and back, finally giving the phone a premium feel we have all been waiting for. Unfortunately, with that upgrade, the phone loses some key features that include a removable battery and an expandable SD card slot. I personally think that the trade-off was well worth it. One thing I don't like about the S6's build is the protruding camera on the back. It would have been nice to keep it somewhat flush like the HTC One M8. Then again, installing a case would eliminate that problem. The HTC One M9 finally moved the power button back down to the right side, although much lower than its predecessor, just under the volume buttons, so there might be some adjusting to do to get used to it. The speakers and the front-facing camera are also still in the same location as the M8, and the same can be said about the Galaxy S6. However, the home button is slightly larger with an improved fingerprint reader. Instead of having all the buttons on the right side of the phone like the M9 does, the S6 volume buttons are located on the left side of the phone, whereas the power button and the SIM card slot are located on the right side. Besides the S6 having its speakers located on the bottom of the phone this time around instead of the back, you can find the usual headphone jack and micro USB port on the bottom for both devices. Anyways, that wraps up the comparison between the Samsung Galaxy S6 and the HTC One M9. There will be tons more content covering these two phones, including my famous camera tests, benchmarks, and speed tests, so make sure you guys hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out. I also want to ask you guys, which phone do you prefer, the M9, the Galaxy S6, or the S6 Edge? Feel free to leave your answer in the comment section down below. Anyways, once again, thanks for watching. This is Ed from TechSource, and I'll see you guys in the next video.